Hello, everyone. Good evening and welcome to this roundtable on making wellness your brand story. I'm Pooja Bothra, Senior Content Lead at ETHR World and your host. I'd like to start with a few words on what to expect from this session. In India, the second wave not only shook the corporate world, but also underlined the importance of staying prepared and responding instantaneously to safeguard employees and their families. Consequently, the definition of a caring workplace has evolved and wellness is emerging as a top motivator for job seekers demanding personalized nurturing, a stress-free environment, and a thriving workplace. In this panel, experts will share insights on self-care and holistic well-being, and we will connect the dots as to how wellness leads to employer branding that enables to attract, recruit, and retain top talent. We have with us in this panel two doctors who are also health and wellness champions. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Marcus Rane. He is a business professional in healthcare industry, having an MBBS degree, and is also founder and CEO of Human Edge. Dr. Sujata Kelkar Shetty is a US-trained biological scientist with a BS degree in genetics and a PhD in toxicology. She's also author and certified wellness coach. In fact, wellness is an indicator of how good a company's leadership and culture is. To share its direct impact on employer branding and talent management, we have a veteran leader from the industry. Rajesh Chandran, VP and Global Head, Talent Acquisition, ITC, Infotech. And we also have a recruitment evangelist, Rohan Sylvester, Indeed. Thank you and welcome once again to this panel.
Thank you, Pooja.
Viewers, we want to make the session very engaging for you, so please share your questions through this chat tab. Do not wait till the end of the session to share your questions. Keep them coming right from the beginning. I would like to start with Dr. Marcus and ask him, employee burnout is at an all-time high. Today, more than ever, business needs a strategy in place to help employees not reach a state of burnout. What's your take on that?
No, absolutely. And I think, if one were looking at the data, it would be scary for anyone involved. Some of the latest surveys I've read shows anywhere between 70 to 80% of people complaining. But I always anecdotally report that I think one in one of us have faced some challenge over the last year because of either the physical effects of COVID or the lockdown, the economic consequences, etc. I think, Pooja, the grand realization that we've all had in 2020 is the competitive advantage that well-being plays in our lives. And it's happened on three lenses. It's happened to us at the individual level because of our own personal health and immunity. It's happened to us at the organizational level from a team perspective and probably the subject of most of our conversation today. And it's happened to us at the national and systemic level as well. Those days where, and I've been in this industry for 20 plus years looking at human performance, where we'd be banging that drum to say, you got to concentrate on a person's and employee's mental health, that your assets, your human capital is your greatest asset, etc. For long times, we had to do a significant amount of cajoling and convincing. Now it is the number one priority for every single CEO who I talk with on a daily basis, not only in India, but anywhere in the world. So I'm happy that it's happened. I'm sad it's taken a pandemic to get us here, but I'm optimistic that the changes we make from today will last us for a very long period of time.
Dr. Sujata, how important is self-care for employees and how can self-care help to tackle burnout?
Self-care is critical. I think if anything else, this pandemic should have woken us up, right? Like Dr. Marcus said, we have recognized at a personal level the high cost we pay when we do not protect our mental, physical, and emotional health. The spiritual health is really at the crux of it. But even if we focus just on the mental and the physical health aspect, it can't be overemphasized. And the basics, it's really the brass tacks, getting enough sleep, making sure your nutrition is sorted, making sure exercise, making sure you've gotten some mindfulness practice going. If you've got these 4 things tackled, right, life is looking pretty good. Unfortunately, more effort is going to have to be put in now if you haven't gotten those habits already in place. But it's required. And there's enough evidence to show that to us. I think since we have 100 participants here today, I want to make sure that we talk about vaccines for a moment and say, please get yourselves vaccinated, because that's the one thing you can do to protect yourselves through this pandemic and subsequently, because this pandemic is going to last longer unless we keep taking the booster shots. But I had to get that in because it's really, really important. And I think organizations should be actually making sure that they get their employees vaccinated. This is a big one. It's really important. And it's the most cost-effective strategy we can put in place right now. Thanks.
Sure, Sujata, totally agree. Mindfulness, good sleep, good food, all helps to improve your self-care. Rajesh, I'd like to go to you and ask you, how are you making wellness a strategy for recruitment?
Yes, Marcus said every organization is built based on the human talent, and any threat to the human lives is not only for that individual, it can collapse the entire economy and the country, right? So therefore, the importance has to be driven at multiple stages and multiple levels within the organization, also from a new talent attraction point of view. So some of the areas that we have observed is the talent is actually the wellness part is not just concentrated to one single stroke. The wellness spreads across into based on the age profile of the individual. And that has an overall impact in the ability of that individual to perform to its peak capacity. For instance, if you take the freshers, people who have just completed their education and looking for an opportunity in the corporate world, they are willing to give their best. And for them, the energy, the drive, and making an impact is more important. So they don't mind going to any extent to ensure that their contribution is noted. That is a critical aspect for them. What is important from the wellness point of view is to make them feel that the do's and don'ts are very important to be told to them. And at the same time, they have a lot of concern about the people, the older people in the family, especially parents, and the support system that they have should be taken care of from a health point of view. So what does the organization do to that segment of the population is completely different from a segment which is 30 to 40 years point of view. For them, family comes more important. Then the management team, which is 40 years and above, and leadership and management team, their requirement is slightly different, right? So it is not one single stroke at which we approach wellness part. It is based on the category of the employee they belong to. At the same time, in today's world, especially in the IT services, if you look at, the average age is 28 to 29 years. So therefore, 80% of your employee strength has a different needs when compared to the rest of the organization. And as Dr. talked about, Sujata talked about the vaccination. So organizations today are taking utmost care to ensure that every employee and the family members, it's not just about the employee, only about that individual. But now it is all about you, your family, your support system, everybody we are concerned about. Therefore, that's a huge shift in the way in which we started to look at wellness. So all these I'm saying is coming as a package, and this is just a tip of the iceberg. So much more to be done in this space.
True, Rajesh. Rohan, going to you, I'd like to ask you, what are the signs you are getting? How important is it for job seekers today to see, what kind of wellness strategy organizations have in store before they decide their employers? So what kind of signs are you getting?
Well, if recruiting wasn't hard enough prior to the pandemic, it's become even harder now, in my opinion. And my heart goes out to recruiters right now, because there's been, as everyone's saying, there's been a monumental shift in what matters. And especially where you have people working from home for the last year. Many of us have been working for more than a year. Stress has come to the forefront. It's one of the most important business issues that a lot of companies are facing. And I think Dr. Marcus was saying the numbers somewhere between 65 to 70%, and I think it's woefully underreported, are reporting that they are facing some form of stress. And as I told, they are going to look to those things as qualifiers. To be frank, prior to the pandemic, I think a lot of recruitment decisions that were taken by job seekers, like where they were going, what they were doing, revolved a lot around growth, around compensation, around benefits, which were more monetarily tagged. But now I think that's changed a lot. In the face of all these changes, we've seen there's been a greater need for people to come together, be empathetic, considerate, and that's what people are also looking for. And communication from organization has never played a more vital role, whether to create a culture of transparency or authenticity and showcase the programs that are being handled, right? Like, what are we doing for our employees? I think it's very telling. I've spoken anecdotally to a lot of job seekers who say, one of the things I'm researching, and is what did they do for their employees during COVID? I'm trying to figure that out, because I know if they did right by them then they will do right by me in the future. And that has become an integral part. So you need to share those kind of pieces of information. And suddenly recruiting is going to hinge on that as well. I mean, it's just more things for recruiters and employer branding teams to think about, but people change and the world change suddenly, and we have to kind of move with those times. We have to acknowledge the fact that things are not going to go back to the same. We have to acknowledge the fact that just showing a fancy office is not enough to convince a person that, yes, this is the company for them. We have to show that we care, be at the forefront of our messaging, and showcase that if you join this company, we will take care of you. And I think Rajesh, Dr. Sujata, and Dr. Marcus were talking about all of these things that they need to do. It's not just enough to do it. We need to sort of communicate this to potential employees as well.
I agree. And I feel transparency will play a very key role. You cannot now just have something in the book and not do it on the ground. That also needs to change. And job seekers are looking for those signs very actively. Dr. Marcus, I'll go to you and I'll ask you, definitely burnout is a problem. And the burnout is also increasing because of this virtual work. Being in front of the screen has not been easy for any of us. So in these circumstances, what do you think is a solution for employers as well as employees with respect to this digital time that they're spending? And what can be some tips you can give?
Yeah, this is a really interesting topic. When the lockdown started last March, I was actually, as part of my research work, sort of collating data from thousands of individual employees around the world and looking to try and make sense of that data. I published this as a paper, the 6 stages that we went through this life cycle. And we're still going through phase 5, actually, of 6, I believe. If we rewind the clock back, there was an early, and I plotted this against stress levels in society. So in the first couple of months, there was actually a reduction in stress scores across the board. And this was the early phases where, we had the adoption of digital technologies. We then had companies trying to engage people in those digital technologies. And for a lot of people, it was that honeymoon phase, right? It was something new and everyone thought this was going to just be for 3-4 months. We were expectively having an extended time at home, etc. Then lockdown 2 happened in India, lockdown 3 happened. The stress scores then began to really sort of plummet inversely. They went to very, very high levels, up to 87% reported stress indices for some people. And that's when that realization came in. And then we had the loneliness creep and it led to the depression, etc. I think the phase we're now in, which as I said is stage 5 of this, is that there is a high degree of acceptance which is happening, right? And that actually got a little compounded because people started to reach acceptance. Then lockdown, the second wave of the pandemic happened, and that hit people much, much more significantly for a variety of health reasons, right? So for people who are going through this acceptance phase, particularly organizations, it's the culture that needs to change. We cannot apply the same old rules to the new paradigm that we're living in. particularly now because of the economic pressure. I mean, if you talk to any company with real estate, they're telling you that they're shedding 21 to 26% of their real estate to try and maintain the EBITDAs. So, real estate is going to change. Travel and hospitality is going to change. Professional services is changing. Automation and manufacturing is changing, etc. So we need to define a new culture playbook. So that's what I've been spending a lot of time with the CEOs that I coach and the organizations we work with, is this shared experience culture where you have some people of the organization working remotely, some in the office, and there's a fungibility because that will always keep changing. Vaccinations will make it change. Acute infections will make it change. Extended people in the family falling ill will make it change. School not opening will make it change for people as that begins to open as well. So all of this fungibility has to define a new culture playbook, and body language, intercommunication skills, accountability metrics, performance agendas, all of those things will have to change in the process as well. So this is a really exciting period of time, I think, for all of us, because we can do away with all the errors and the mistakes that we made from the last 100 years of the third industrial revolution and really focus now on the fourth and how we want to create a new working world for everyone.
Sure. Rajesh, I'll go to you and I'll ask you that, one size does not fit all. And you already brought in the perspective of, generation-wise wellness initiatives. To that, flexibility is also emerging as a key criteria for wellness. Why? Because it gives employees the freedom to, work wherever, however, whatever timing from wherever. So how do you see that evolving in the workplace?
Yeah, so when you're on a phase change in the domain that you're working in, for instance, in the digital space, we see the pandemic has triggered a demand which is unprecedented or not been projected or envisaged before. So every services which has been provided in the industry today are getting digitized at a very high pace. And the more the lockdowns happening in, the digitization demand is also going significantly high. All these require people. These people have to be bright, smart, and highly capable individuals who can make that change happen. And good part is India, because of its engineering and extraordinary foundation, is in the forefront of taking that outsourcing part and doing what is required for the US and UK markets. In such a space, we are seeing that the talent needs a lot of space, personal space for themselves to feel that they can contribute effectively to the organization, provided every need of them are met. And these needs are not necessarily how good is the transport from your location to the office. It's about making sure that they work from a place which is really comfortable to them. That's the outcome of the pandemic. Before that, we used to have work from home as a policy. 4 days, 5 days in a month used to be the kind of policies. And some organizations, very few organizations will say that you can work permanently in work from home, provided you are able to monitor the deliverables, which is the outcome-based model. Now, with the new dimension that has come in, the people have spread across India today. In fact, there is a gig worker community which is coming up, which enables you to work for some time to a particular organization, and sometime you can do a hobby on your own. That kind of a concept is slowly catching up, which is we all heard about in other countries. So people want to engage for a specific time of work, and specific time they are saying that we are not going to be connected to the organization. So that is a community we need to take from a diversity point of view. Same is the case with the geography reach. As I said, every city in India today is a potential office to you. So virtual office. So how good you are going to give that experience and inclusivity for them is becoming very important. So our onboarding process which is already digitized, is extremely now interactive. And we give 24/7 kind of a support on digital platforms so that an individual can connect to an organization at any given point of time and seek the right questions and take forward. In that process, something called a digital buddy has been introduced here. Your digital buddy is like a personal secretary sitting in your machine, and that takes care of your needs, that takes care of your daily activities, and summarizes and gives you in a digested form of what is ahead of you and what are the actions which is yet to be completed. So that way, it makes things easy for people to catch up with whatever the work that has to be done. And at the same time, ability to create space, time for the individual to do something which is much beyond work is the best time that we are in. So how to capitalize is in our hands.
I want to take this concept of digital buddy a little forward, because lots of organizations today have chatbots, which help to check pulse of the employees real time. So, Dr. Sujata, how effective are these in spotting whether how exactly employees are feeling at a particular point of time? And also, there is an audience questions that what is the difference between burnout and stress in the workplace? So I'd like you to address both these questions.
Sure. So when we talk about employee burnout, right, depending on where you're coming from, assuming you're somebody who works in HR and are looking out for your employees, exhaustion, right? Severe physical exhaustion would be a sign. Mistakes. One of the key signs of burnout is the inability to concentrate, right? And remember important details. Sickness. Obviously, if the person is falling sick more often than you would expect, that's a sign. Depression. Very easy to pick out. So sort of inability to focus, inability to sort of maintain emotional balance, irritability, right? Another sign to watch out for. And then cynicism, because cynicism is one of the key signs, right? As far as we are concerned, you can immediately pick out a cynical attitude in the workplace. So having transparent processes in place can really help to build employee trust and improve the loyalty for an organization. But for that, I think fundamentally the genotype and the phenotype of the organization needs to change, right? The fundamentals of the organization, what the values of the organization that rests on, and how they express that in the workplace. So having all kinds of different ways in which they support employee wellness, not just by having yoga classes and meditation classes, but by actively engaging with the employees to support their wellness in very, very distinct ways that keep the employees sort of grounded in a space that allows them to be the best employees that they can be, right? We all know now that it's a win-win situation. But how you go about it is really dependent on your values and then what you do about those values in a very concrete way that supports them. Because what I notice about employee wellness plans that have so far been there pre-pandemic is that they don't necessarily engage the employees, right? Google is a fabulous example. I was talking to employees in their California headquarters, and they have like a smorgasbord, the most beautiful wellness offerings. If I worked there, I would be spending half my life post my working hours availing of those. But that's because I'm a wellness enthusiast. But when I was talking to employees, I said, we don't really use these. And that's the catch. Like, how do you get people to chew on them? How do you get people to engage with them? And how do you make it a part of their lives? To go back to what Rajesh was talking about in our pre-webinar talk about how, like he was talking about in the context of keeping employees motivated professionally. But I think you also need to have wellness motivators in place. How do you keep employees motivated about staying fit, mentally fit, physically fit, right? Keeping nutritional balance, making them excited about it, because it's not easy to do. Changing your lifestyle habits is not easy. Let's face it. There's a reason why people don't do it. But there has to be that passion within the organization to support employee wellness.
Sure. Dr. Marcus, we also hear about these designations like Chief Fun Officer. We have wellness officers. We have Chief Fitness Officers. So how do you see that increasing, going ahead? And also coming back to my previous question, how effective do you think are digital chatbots to actually find out about how employees are feeling?
The definition of well-being is certainly increased over the last 20 years, right? I think back to when we all started, it was mainly limited to executive health screens blood tests, diagnostics. It then started to include virtual races, step counts, nutrition, online consultations in the office, Zumba, etc. And now, of course, we've got this whole space around mental and emotional health, which is becoming an increasingly important space in the organization. And then there are some companies, folks who look at sort of purpose-led initiatives or spiritual health as financial well-being, environmental well-being, climate aspects. So it's interesting to see how this series of circles are broadening wider and wider and wider. And as it does so, I think the types of folks involved in that complex matrix will evolve, from maybe chief fitness to having all those other components. Maybe there'll be a chief environmental officer beyond just sustainability, but how your offices work and how your employees sort of connect in a carbon neutral way, etc. So I think that will be an interesting alteration. With regard to the chatbots, I think it's become so ubiquitous now, this digital involvement. We use it in the social media networking world. Of course, we all consume our content online. So why can't we also use the same tools for our work advantage? And getting a regular pulse check is an interesting way. I have two, however, things which I often ask our clients to be very wary of. And number one is the reporting bias. So similar to those machines in the toilet, you're more likely to click on that unhappy sign if the toilet has been really dirty, and it's the same way. You're just more likely to report negatively if you're coming from a particular bias. So that's something very important for us to contemplate around, right? And the second is what you do with that data and information, because the trend, as we say in medicine, the trend is your friend. You can't build a strategy around one data point. So if you're seeing something, you need to really think about the composite decision making that went into at a macro level, which leads to this particular outcome, right? Was there something else happening within the organization, either from a business perspective, a C-suite change, industry change, something happened in the media, the stock price tumbled? Why is this score the way it is? And is there just a causality between what I'm measuring and what the outcome is? Or is there a compounding effect which is having a role? Because health and well-being is that difficult. Behavioral sciences is that difficult. So I think there's great value, but I always, when we're working with our clients, we make sure that we are ensuring that we're looking at the whole picture and trying to figure out, why is this signal giving me this particular variable right now?
Rohan, to share some of the best practices in employer branding that you're seeing in industry?
Just to showcase how important it is, you have to understand the role that employer branding plays, right? It's not just about telling your story. It's also telling your story in parallel with what your employees are saying. And so employer branding is not this niche story being told in a silo. It's being told by multiple people. We have to acknowledge that, right? It's not one voice. It's probably 1,000 voices, depending on the size of your organization. And most organizations have the ability to tell their story really well, but I don't think a lot of companies leverage what their employees are saying. And that's where truly successful, effective employer branding stories get told. Because 96 to 97% of candidates nowadays are reading reviews, are looking up what the organization, the people are saying. And in very large numbers, in excess of 80%, say it influences them, not just from an application standpoint, like would I apply to this company? It influences them down to where they accept an offer. So a good, effective employer brand is one that highlights information that really helps job seekers figure out, would I be happy here? Right? If you can answer that question in a job seeker's mind, and you are winning that battle. Now, this is where it gets difficult. Would I be happy here? Is all five of us here, right? For one of us, it could be compensation. For one of us, it could be work-life balance. For one of us, it could be anything. So an effective employer brand is one that truly understands the audience, gets to know what are the different types of things that they value, and showcase a messaging that addresses each of this, so that they know at the end, yes, I will be happy here because they are going to pay me well. I know there is always this taboo about talking about compensation, but the reality is that's an important thing. So you got to talk about that. You need to talk about mental health because even though there is a taboo, it's becoming more important and people want to know. There are some people who are looking for work-life balance, and that could be important to them. Not everyone is a high achiever who wants to work through the day, through the evenings, right? There are some people who genuinely want to sit back. You have to figure out what your company is looking for, what your company wants in an employee, what they are looking for, and try and find those matches. So to say there's one size fits all for employer branding would be difficult. But if there is one thing you need to do is understand who your employees are, who are the employees you want, and then try and answer the question, would I be happy there for them, right? And typically that would help. Some of the things you should be talking about is the mission of your organization. You should be talking about whether you offer remote or hybrid work. You should be talking about all the benefits that you give around PTO, on shorter work weeks, on mandatory time off, which would be an amazing thing, on support from a medical perspective, which has suddenly gone up in that. And also, there are a lot of people who want to work for companies that make a difference. So you want to talk about social programs that your company is doing, your outreach programs that you're doing, or maybe it's just that the business that you have is one that changes people's lives. And the reason I'm saying that is something I'm proud of because I work for a company. In fact, I think you can see our mission statement behind me, which is that. And I enjoy that. That drives me every day. So, and it's a big part of our employer branding as well. So this is how you create a great employer branding practice where we are able to share, things that matter to job seekers and make sure not to forget the reviews. There are 1,000 other voices out there. So you have to address that issue as well.
I'll take an audience question now. Rajesh, it'll be great if you answer this. Much like other benefit programs, is there a way to effectively assess the ROI of wellness programs?
Yeah, there are multiple ways in which we can do this. The simple one is about the ability of an employee to be consistent in the productivity. Nowadays, if you look at the annual appraisals are now becoming quarter appraisals in many of the corporate offices, right? And there are continuous monitoring systems which has been established in the sense that not necessary to talk about the bad aspects, but also create a relationship with the supervisor and the working employee to have a constant dialogue on the performance and the goals of the function. So ROI can be measured by the ability of an individual to contribute both the short-term and long-term goals, right? If somebody is consistent, that means many things are working right for the individual, right? The self-awareness, the competency of the job they are doing in, the expectation of the organization on the individual, and the individual ability to manage themselves, both mentally and physically, and also their ecosystem, both financially as well as social part, is all has to happen for you to have a consistent outcome, right? And that is one way of looking at it. Second is, there is a set of benefits which every organization gives it to employees, be it number of holidays, be it medical sickness leave, then your insurance, medical insurance part. All these are, one is to support the employee when they are in difficult times. At the same time, it's a yardstick which shows how good they are able to manage so that they don't need these benefits, right? It is not necessary to take away that. It's about how effectively they are utilizing. If somebody is doing consistently vacation of 5 days every quarter, still able to perform well, is a fantastic, what you call as an employee, because he is able to balance his life as well as be a productive employee to the organization. That's a measure. Same way, if somebody is not able to do, every year they are able to overshoot their medical bills, they're not able to meet the what you call as the organization's limits that has been provided, we have to intervene. We have to see what can be helped for them to become better, right? These are some of the quick measures that you can look at and see what can be improved upon and what can be enabled further for instance, like Dr. Sujata talked about, we are trying to create personal space for every employee to contribute to the maximum extent, right? Work, personal life, family life, right? In that space, you need to give the right inputs and also give the right direction for them to utilize that time well. Many of them don't know, and they end up spending that time also for work related activities or something which is not connected to your focused goal that you wanted to go for, right? And that is also creates a back-end wellness issues at a later point of time. Somebody is fantastic human and a great team player, but his personal life is completely in a different tangent, right? We get to know about this very late when the performance starts dipping, or from complaints suddenly sporadically coming from somewhere else. Those are the inputs which shows that somebody is overstressing themselves. They may be playing a dual character, one at office, one at what you call as home, which needs input to be corrected upon, right? So all these are symptoms. All these are symptoms, and it definitely gives what you call a space for action, and how that action is taken provides a better return on investment.
Taking a cue from what Rajesh says, Dr. Sujata, I'd also like to ask you that, being focused in one activity has become very difficult, especially for these, 20 to 25-year-olds who will be hitting workplaces soon or already hit the workplace. Social media is also a culprit, but, the attention span has reduced a lot. So what would be some of the tips you can give that cohort?
First thing to understand about that cohort is that neuroscience has shown us that our brains are still developing till we're 24 years old. So if you look back at all of the things that you did in your earlier 20s, now it makes sense, right? I mean, you're still a child. It's incredible how this species of ours takes forever to grow up, but it does. But, let's keep that aside. I think what we need to really understand is that social media hygiene, mental hygiene needs to be looked at, right? Sleep hygiene needs to be looked at very seriously. People need to understand that they need to have discipline when it comes to how they engage with those screens of theirs. And this generation has the advantage of having had that access to information, connectedness, etc. But they also have the disadvantage of a reduced attention span. So I think a discipline is very important. A discipline that it'd be interesting to see how companies can impose that without being an imposition on freedom. But it really is again something that's going to have to be motivated in people. And what's interesting about wellness habits like sleep hygiene, right? Switching off your screens an hour before bedtime, or making sure that you put your phone away when you're working, or making sure that you keep your social media sites sort of closed. Whatever the case might be, I'm not in that generation, so I don't even know how many social media sites they access. But I think what's important is to recognize that it works. So if organizations can motivate their employees, this is very important, to engage in certain wellness practices, the individual will keep it up, right? You get someone to exercise every day for 40 days. 40 days is like the magical number. It becomes a habit. But the key is to get there. And that's where employees need their support. So it really doesn't matter what it is, what kind of hygiene we're trying to focus on. But I think it's important that they get the support, because it's very hard to do it on your own, particularly if things have been going a certain way for you and you think that's fine. And as I said, they're still children. So they really need more support than you would imagine.
Yeah, I think surely they require 40-day activity as a part of the KRAs, to actually take it seriously. Dr. Marcus, we already discussed mental health. And we are all very worried about, because of the pandemic, the lockdown, going through this crisis, as well as losing close ones. Mental health is going to be a big, big problem in the next 2 to 3 years. So what do you think organizations need to do today to identify early signs of mental illness amongst the employees and, create support groups?
I think the basics should be taken care of. And I think almost 100% of companies now have a sort of an EAP or some sort of counseling service at hand. It's been quite disappointing to see the uptake of those in India. I mean, that number is pitifully low. And I think a big challenge to do with that is still the residual stigmatization, which is part of our culture. So to address that, one of the big ways that I work with my organizations is to rebrand mental well-being. And the rebranding effect really starts from the language we even initiate in the conversation. The colors, for example, right? If I ask any of you to think about an image in your head of someone who is mentally unwell, a lot of us would have a picture of someone with their head in their hands. It's typically in the black, gray, blue color palette. There is probably some sort of melancholic music, maybe a Wagner symphony playing in the background. But if you think about a physical wellness image, it's the converse. It's a human being breaking through sort of a finish line, having completed a race, big smile on your face, bright colors, etc. So I think the rebranding of mental well-being is a big component of that. The way, the language we use, how we craft those conversations, the color palettes we use, the imagery, the music for soundtracks, etc. So that's one big piece, and that's the storytelling piece that I keep reminding our clients around. The second aspect is leading by example. And what leaders did very, very well was they put everyone else first. But what they forgot to do in that process is remember that self-care and self-love is not selfish. And a lot of companies, their leaders have reached a breaking point because of that. And so we're now retrospectively going back and looking at, well, how did we arrive at this particular instance? Most of the large organizations in India have lost very, very senior personnel over the last 6 months. Not just directly because of COVID, but there were other aspects, maybe stress, burnout, have had contributions to that effect as well. So how do we retrofit that so that we're now looking after our leaders as well? And that's where this concept, which I keep talking about, longevity of leaders, right? The Indian CEO is getting older, their tenure is going down, her competition is getting fiercer, unicorns are more apparent. So all of these things are making the role of a CEO much harder. And she has lesser resources, and all the stakeholders having to be managed around that. So that's the second element, is getting the leaders to start to look after themselves in a sustainable manner. And the last thing which we've introduced is this program called the Mind Mitra program, which is where we effectively train individuals within the organization to recognize aspects within their colleagues when things are beginning to go wrong. Right? We're not training psychologists or psychiatrists, etc. But it's this idea of, and it's part of that normalization of the culture, is it how can you start to pick up the early signs, changes in productivity, changes in performance, changes in language, changes in behavior, changes in emotional liability, all of those things, and then put them in front of the right tools early on before all of these downstream manifestations begin to occur. So these are just some of the practical things which I spend a lot of my day-to-day time with our organizations around APAC. Yeah.
I'll take an audience question now. Rajesh, this question is for you. Employer branding message change with time. How does a company keep pace?
See, there are two parts to this. One is what the industry, that is the actual client, is looking forward, right? That is one trigger point for you to keep pace with the changing dynamics in the industry point of view. The other one is from the employee point. One side is the client, the other side is the employee. An organization which effectively manages these two are the successful ones from a policy decision-making point of view. So currently, there is one single action that has happened in the last 14, 15 months, which has changed both the sides together, right? The demand side also has changed. The supply side, which is the employee services, also is going through their thing. Therefore, the aspect of, like Marcus said, Dr. Marcus said, the aspect of focus on well-being has become more and more keen at this moment than anything else. Right? If a management or the CEO or the board has to look at their company forward, the only thing which is important is, am I giving good service to the people around me who are my customers? At the same time, the employees who are also people in my organization have been fully taken care of, right? Any policy, any product, any service which is associated with focus on these three things is the one which is getting accepted in the market, right? Any product or service which is not able to meet this demand immediately, we see that those segments are not even able to come up. They're all waiting for the good times to come back, right? That's a stark difference in the economy that is brought into picture. Therefore, the aspect of which business you belong to, what domain you wanted to handle, and how do you want to serve the community around you, which includes your client, your employee, and your ecosystem, becomes that much more important for your survival. I hope I addressed this question.
Yeah. Going to you, Rohan, the business case of wellness investment is justified by its direct linkage to enhance creativity, innovation, and performance of the workforce, as well as reaching the top position in an industry and being able to attract the best talent. How would you articulate the subtle rewards of well-being investment?
Yes, obviously, the obvious benefits of wellness programs is as you said, it helps employees actually be more productive and be more valuable to the organization, right? And actually see value from what they're doing. There are, of course, intangible consequences, right? And I'm talking primarily from my perspective, my expertise, which is recruitment and branding. Happy employees are employees who feel their companies values them. And in turn, they become ambassadors for your organization, right? They sort of share your stories in passing with their friends, families, peer groups, or even post testimonials and reviews on sites, right? They are actually happy enough to go there and put it out there. So as Dr. Marcus was saying, typically the research bias that does, the reviews bias that does come in, where people typically only give reviews or leave feedback when they're unhappy, can be overcome when you actually create a program that is genuinely helping people. I've seen this in a few organizations. I've seen this in my organization where people have been given a lot of flexibility. We've created wellness programs which are not fixed. They are not for a specific generation. They're not for a specific employee. There is no bias depending on where you are. They've created wellness programs and asked your employees, what do you want to do? You pick, you choose what suits you. And as a consequence, we've been able to create an organization where people are happy, right? It could be something as simple as 80% work, 80% pay, which our company instituted, where you do less work because the work from home is a lot more taxing for some people, and they can take that up. And all of this creates really happy employees, and they are going to share these stories. And we've seen that, right? People are very proud of what they're doing, they're proud of the work, proud of the organization, and they tell their friends. Even if those friends are not happy, or not interested in joining the organization, they're going to tell other people. It's going to matter. They're going to refer more people to your organization. They're going to be proud of their organization, and they're going to refer more people. And they lend a sense of authenticity to your company story, which will make a much larger impact than any marketing or branding activity. You can't pay for this kind of publicity, right? Where you have every single employee within your organization, or at least a majority of our employees, going out there and say, this is a great place to work. It doesn't matter how many awards you won and you put that award on your website. If your entire cohort employee group is telling people it's great to work, people are going to take that at face value and they're going to believe it. And conversely, there is, of course, the opposite to this, right? The subtle gains that you get from a good wellness programs, it can also happen if you don't have good ones. When you have unhappy employees, they are equally going to go share that story. So to sort of sum it up, this is one of the gains that I've noticed. I'm sure others might have something to add, but the ability to attract more talent just because people are telling them that it's a great place to work.
Yes, I totally agree. Rohan, one audience question for you, Sujata. You spoke about, so how does an employee trust an employee wellness program without being cynical about it. I think you spoke about, trusting the employee wellness program. Should it start from a culture change or leadership talks and so on, and not just launching a wellness program?
It's a really important point. It's a profoundly important point. And it reminds me of a talk I had with somebody who was studying the impact. This is relevant. Studying the impact of the gut microbiome on mental health. He was doing a PhD at Cambridge, and he was suffering from depression, and he was looking for a postdoctoral job at Harvard. And he was not willing to share that he had depression with his prospective employee, his professor at Harvard. He got the job finally, and he never shared the fact that he was suffering from depression. Now, this is, or perhaps he did later. I don't know. I don't know what the case is. But this goes back to tell you that, the lack of belief that people are not going to judge you if you have a mental wellness concern is something that runs deep, and it runs across cultures across the world. It's not just in India. In India, perhaps it's far more embedded in our culture because we don't speak about health in general. People don't talk the way the way they do in the United States about their personal issues, right? So I think this question makes a lot of sense, and the answer has to be with the organization. The organization should be reassuring you that privacy concerns are going to be met. The organization should be opening up right from the leadership perspective, where leaders come out and say, I had depression, I have anxiety, I'm dealing with sleep issues, right? Or my sister has depression, or, make it so that it's okay to talk about it. And leaders have to step up and do that. But the stigma is a natural concern, right? If I'm going to worry about my employer judging me differently or passing me up on job opportunities, I'm not going to open up. I'm not going to take them up on their wellness program, however fantastic the counseling services are. And this is an issue I've seen across the companies I've worked with, that people don't take up these mental health services that are offered. And I think it's a legitimate concern that the employees have, and it's really up to the employers to fix that. They have to do more, and it has to come from the leadership. And I think there's a question in amongst the ones that you have about how leaders can help themselves. And I think there needs to be self-compassion and compassionate training for leaders and for the employees. It's really important right now, right? That compassionate leadership has to come across within the organization. Yeah. That you genuinely care.
Today, more than ever, there is a need for leaders to walk the talk, even with respect to, their personal self-care and fitness and health goals. One more audience question. Dr. Marcus, I would like to ask you this question. Considering the importance of wellness priority agenda for management to ensure, is there any thought of any regulatory move from the authorities concerned expecting corporates to comply going forward? Do we need regulations to monitor organization for wellness strategy?
I mean, I always, it's always very difficult to make any sort of commentary around regulatory benefits or challenges. I don't know whether CSR budgets in the future may be applied to certain settings around health and well-being for their organizations, etc. But rather than retro and force fit it, I think the best incentive is to showcase just how effective these programs are, and good ones prove that ROI, right? Even from the folks here who represent the organizations like Rohan and Rajesh, they've seen the benefits in action. They know how efficacious this is, and therefore they're more inclined to invest in these types of programs for their employees. So therefore, I'm not sure the heavy hand of government or regulation may necessarily be that much of an incentive in a situation like this. Yeah.
Rajesh, what's your take on this?
Same way. See, combining the previous question and this, if the CEO of the organization is able to see high productivity, consistent performance improvement, ability to meet the targets revenue, profitability, taking care of the employee happiness quotient, then what more is important for the CEO to say no, right? So therefore, it gives that much of width and space for investments, for ability to focus on this aspect, and at the same time ensure that the future is well secured, which is more important. We are now talking about time and now at this place what we are to do, but this is all about the future. This is the way you are projecting to your culture. The culture change is to be projected on a long-term basis, and whether there is a pandemic there or not, it doesn't matter. But the changes that we are bringing in today has to last, and we have to be consistent towards it. Therefore, obviously, the focus is much higher.
There is also one question that has come from the audience, and somebody is asking that should wellness be separate from HR, because it needs specialists to take care of that function. It should not be a part of the HR.
See, wellness is if you're taking wellness as a word, it's a very broad term, because as I talked about, an employee base in an organization is spread across based on age group, based on experience level, based on the function that they belong to. Therefore, there is no one size fits for all policy that will meet all the requirements of an organization space. The young people who are there in the segment, their wellness is more financial wellness. Their ability to have a social wellness factor is more important at that stage. As you gain experience and you are in your middle-aged segment, your financial stability goes into a matured form of seeking organization help to protect your family at large. So the medical benefit wellness becomes much more important at that point of time, right? So at every stage of your career that you belong to, the wellness quotient also has an importance changing it. There are some 6-7 different wellness which has been formed, which is important to all the employees in the organization, but the dominance of its importance will change as per your needs of the employee part. Therefore, it is definitely part of the organization function. If you are looking at an ecosystem oriented, like a chief environmental officer, somebody called out, right? Then that could be part of the admin or the facilities, right? But somewhere it has to connect back to the system that an employee gets the view that he is always going to have a spread across the needs. For instance, if I don't know many policies which is not concerned to me, I don't even bother to know about. But when there's a need comes, I need to go to one single person or a function to get to know and seek their help. In many organizations, that is the HR function, right? Where else you will go? You can't go to a finance team member and ask, I have this particular problem. How do I solve? You will solve, right? So the question is not about the execution. It can get executed wherever it is. But the point of view, how it has to be done and why it has to be done and how better it can be improved upon has to be in one single function, which is HR.
We are conscious of the time, and so it'll be time to close this roundtable. And I just conclude by saying that definitely wellness is a key consideration for employer branding. And 2020 has highlighted numerous gaps, but Corporate Inc. is working very, very seriously and creating a very holistic wellness initiative and practice for its employees. With that, I'd like to thank all of you for taking out time today and being a part of this very interesting and on a very important topic. So thank you all for joining in today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pooja. That was a wonderful session.